Good evening and a very warm lighthouse welcome to you all. It's very exciting to see Italy and the Netherlands and Brighton, good old Fife representing tonight for the launch of The Split. And our host for tonight's event, Girls on Girls, is the wonderful Edinburgh-based novelist, veteran romance writer, author of several of the bookshop's favourites, including the newest, Roll in the Hay. We have Lola Keeley, who's going to take you on this hilarious romp of a book. And so to introduce our author, would you all from home give a little wave and a clap for our host tonight, Lola Keeley.
Evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I am so happy to be doing this. I have to say, when Lighthouse first asked me to come and host an event, I first of all had to check that they meant we were still online. So not quite got open doors yet, but we're getting there, hopefully, slowly but surely. But yeah, The Split by Laura Kay, that is what we are going to be talking about tonight. And I hope, if you haven't got your copy yet, there's a little link just underneath. So you can see a little button just down the bottom to buy the book. But, you can reserve judgment a bit longer. It's fine. We're here for a good hour to talk about all things The Split, so don't worry. So romantic comedy. Are there two better words as a genre? I'm not sure there are, but I love them in movies. I really love them in books. And here we have a sort of timely, fun, light-hearted, but also kind of deep and serious story with characters that I swear you would think you had already met once you spend a couple of pages with them. So you will not believe this once you've read it, but I'm just going to spoil this fact for you now. This is actually Laura's first novel. So yeah, read it and hate her a little bit for that. That's fine. We're all going to be okay with that. But yes, it is. Starts off London based, so I was like, hey, I'm on familiar ground, and takes us to the exotic locale of Sheffield, where most of our action is set. So that's kind of what we're dealing with. We're looking at a romance that goes wrong, followed by a romance that maybe goes a little bit better. But I'm not going to spoil you right up front. I'm going to let Laura tell you more about the book and maybe even give you a little preview of what you can expect from it. So welcome, Laura.
Thank you. What a lovely introduction. So yeah, The Split. I mean, it's about a woman named Ali who is dumped by her girlfriend Emily and moves back to Sheffield from London to live with her dad, taking Emily's cat Malcolm with her. And when she gets to Sheffield, she reunites with a childhood friend, Jeremy, who's also sort of miserable. He's also been dumped. And they decide together that they're going to run the Sheffield Half Marathon in a sort of sad attempt to get the attention of their exes. And fun ensues.
It very much does. Excellent.
And I was going to do a little reading from chapter 1. Just so you can get like a feel of the book. And I promise that it gets happier from this book. Yeah. So chapter 1 is called Overboard. The kitchen was smaller and darker than it had felt before, even with the orange sun setting on the windows. The crisp winter air cut through the heat of the boat's tiny wood burner, and I shivered. The cupboards seemed too close together, every door crashing into another, not enough surfaces, not enough space. I was more animated than usual, clattering about, talking loudly, laughing obnoxiously. I was trying to catch Emily's eye to somehow bring her into the room, which she'd walked into minutes before, but still failed to completely occupy. I wish I'd cleaned up a bit, noticing my laptop and several dirty mugs on the table. I adjusted my hair into a neater ponytail. I was suddenly and ridiculously self-conscious of being in my Kermit the Frog pyjama bottoms, as if Emily had never seen me in them before, as if she hadn't worn hers the night before. I found myself talking non-stop about my mundane day, about Malcolm, who sat on the bookshelf looking bored by the whole sorry scene, about what I was cooking, about strange Mr. Jeffrey's noisy building project next door, which now seemed to be taking the shape of a kennel, and should we be worried that he was getting a dog? Emily sat at the kitchen table and looked out of the tiny round window on the side of the boat, through which you could just about make out the shapes of the trees and the deep green of the murky river. Every time something I said elicited a response greater than a nod or a murmur, I felt triumphant, clinging to those yes, no's and maybes like the sweetest and most tender declarations of love. Emily alternated between fiddling with a loose button on her shirt and running her fingers through her long dark hair, pushing it roughly away from her face as if it stung every time it touched her. I thought the more I talked, the more likely she was to come around. I couldn't stop looking at her. I wanted to see her relax. But Emily's eyes wandered, filled with that strange kind of sadness that you impose on yourself a few times in your life when it's for the best, in the long run. When I finally paused to put the dinner plates on the table, I immediately knew I should never have stopped. But by then it was already too late. That was my fatal mistake. I wished I could have stood in the kitchen forever, making pasta and small talk, until I finally said the thing that convinced Emily she was about to make a terrible mistake. I should have filibustered her into staying. There must have been a magic combination of words that would have worked. Instead, I allowed that dreadful silence to envelope us, thick and heavy, as the first tears fell from Emily's eyes. I'm so sorry, Ali.
Well, there's a start.
It is funny, I swear.
It does get a little lighter after that. But yeah, I mean, let's start there. What made you feel like starting on a big dramatic and what seems like a very down note for what is quite a fun book?
So when I was coming up with the concept for this book, I had the characters first. So I had Ali and Jeremy, who she meets later in the book, and I knew that I wanted their relationship to be key. But I also knew that I wanted Ali to have just gone through a breakup. And so actually originally when I wrote the book, that breakup scene happened later. Like the book opened with Ali in Sheffield already with her dad. And then we shifted it for sort of the impact of that really sad and yeah, it sort of gets lighter as the book progresses, I think.
Excellent. So Sheffield obviously is a major feature in the book because that's where Ali spends most of her time. She does take Malcolm the cat with her, which, you know, as a cat owner myself is like, yeah, that would be my first move. So I completely understand that. Are you from Sheffield? You got ties to Sheffield yourself? Was that a big part of the decision? Or
yeah, so I'm not from Sheffield, but I went to university in Sheffield and then stayed there. So I lived there for 6 years in total. Yeah, so I was there from when I was 19, and I think it was a really formative time, and I knew that I wanted to write about Sheffield. And I also knew that when I was sort of writing about running, that I wanted to write about Sheffield because it's the perfect city to write sort of funny running scenes, because it's so hilly, you know. I can't.
Yes. As an Edinburgh resident, I can definitely sympathise with that.
Yeah.
I always tell people since I moved back here about 7 years ago, and obviously it's the only city I've lived in where you can go uphill on the way somewhere and uphill on the way back. Like at some point it has to be downhill, right? Like just one of these times. I very much got that vibe from Sheffield reading about it. Are you? I'm going to shock you here. I'm not a mad runner myself. I am not an enthusiast of the running arts, but are you a regular runner yourself?
I am. I have run. I do run, and I have run for many years, and I have run one half marathon, not the Sheffield one. My wife ran the Sheffield half marathon a few years ago and burst into tears at the end, which like really like says it all. But I also ran the London Marathon.
Oh, nice.
And since then, I said I would never sign up to any other run ever again, and I haven't. But I do run regularly, but just like short distances and very slowly. Really, it's more for my mind than anything else.
At one point, I think, yeah, because the description of the running is so vivid, but not in an off-putting way. In a way, it was kind of like you're in Ali's head with her, and you're kind of cheering her on. And there's certain points where it feels like you yourself are climbing Everest with her, like. I was checking my watch and like, am I getting like workout points for this? Because, you know, you're absolutely like, you know, she's out of breath and you're sitting there going, am I out of breath? So, and for someone who's, you know, my third book was about tennis, which again is quite a remove from my daily life. It's quite a tricky thing to write action and sport in a way that people who don't necessarily have the same enthusiasm for it can kind of get into it. So I thought that was really great that it's, you know, it's running, but not necessarily for people who not only for people who love running, it's also for people who are like, I like the idea, but someone else should do that. So that was a great theme, I thought, throughout. The other great love of Ali's life, apart from Malcolm, of course, unreciprocated though it may be, is baking. And yeah, there were some foodie descriptions in there that I think Nigella would have been quite proud of. Are you a big foodie yourself? Are you into your baking, or did you just give that to Ali?
So I do love baking. I am not anywhere near as good as Ali. I am far from a professional. So I think the bakes that Ali does are the bakes that I would love to do. And I think for like many years, I sort of harbored a secret desire to like work in a bakery and like, you know, that kind of thing. But I mean, I don't have the patience. I don't like getting up early in the morning. Like it was never for me. So yeah, I gave it to her to do instead.
Excellent. Well, certainly it was like the perfect balance to all the virtuous exercise and running, was all the, you know, sort of slightly naughtier baked goods that she was, you know, churning out on a regular basis. That was great for her. The other, we talked about Jeremy just a little while. We mentioned him before as her sort of, you know, there's obviously in fiction, there's that old trope of the gay best friend. And that was, you know, it had something in common with that, but obviously they hadn't spoken for a number of years. And how did you find building up their friendship with that gap from their childhood and then meeting again as adults? Was that hard to do?
In some ways, yes, but in others, no. So like I sort of wrote it with the approach of a meet cute. Like I think they have this fantastic chemistry, and I really wanted to get across that it's not just a romantic relationship that is built on chemistry. I think some of the best friendships have this like brilliant chemistry where you just like, you know, really get like a buzz off being around the other person, and you can make each other laugh and tell what the other person is thinking. And I really wanted that chemistry for them, even though there's obviously no romantic spark. Yeah. And I love that you say about being the sort of like gay best friend thing, because he is the gay best friend and she is the gay best friend. And I loved that for them both. Like they didn't have to fulfill their roles that they might have done in sort of the sort of literature that we have read in the past, where he has to like support all her decisions but he has this like very like sexless life, and he's just like very camp and this and that, and she just, you know, I always feel like if there is a lesbian in this kind of genre in a rom-com, she's always in love with the straight protagonist.
And it seems like such a waste. There's such a sort of thwarted way to go, and I think that's such a good point, because sometimes when we, you know, watch romance or read romance, we tend to focus on that sort of romantic relationship to the expense of everything else. And obviously most people are so much more than that. You know, we have our family relationships, we have our friends, and even, you know, work relationships and colleagues and stuff. It's maybe not at the same level, but it's all the things that go into making up a person. And I think that's why so many of these characters just kind of jumped off the page, because, you know, you believe that Jeremy goes to his call center job and he absolutely hates it. Like you've been there, whether it's you know, call centers, working in a shop, or your part-time job after school. You know, everyone can sympathize with that sort of, you know, point in your life at some point where you think, God, what am I doing? And that was quite a big thread running through it, I felt, as well. There's a lot of people on Ali, Jeremy, even Emily, I suppose, to a point, although we don't necessarily sympathize at first. But they've got decisions to make, and their choices are maybe limited, you know, by their age, by where they are, by what they've done. So was that something that you felt kind of you wanted to talk about really through these characters? Life choices.
I think that the sort of time of their lives that I'm writing about, so Ali is 29 in the book, and they're all around that age, is such a difficult time in many ways, because whatever it is that you've been doing throughout your 20s, and that this isn't just necessarily true of relationships, but also of your career, your friendships, where you live, you know, just the way you've been living your life as you approach 30 is like this like time of like, am I going to keep going in what I'm doing? Like, am I really, really going to just keep on down the same path, or this is the time to make a change? So And it feels like that for them. And with Ali, it's sort of enforced. Like she may never have made a change.
She was really, just kind of stuck for a while there, wasn't she? She's,
so,
needed an external force.
Exactly. But she got there eventually, and the same with Jeremy. And I feel like a lot of people go through that at that age. Yeah,
so certainly, I remember that phase. Well, God, it seems like a million years ago at the moment, but I know a lot of people still going through it just now, with especially this past year where careers have all been thrown up in the air for a lot of us, and it's a bit of a weird time. In terms of, the rom-com is just, it's such a balancing act to get right. What were your kind of influences, coming into this? Like, did you go and sort of immerse yourself in that kind of book, or did you sort of start fresh and ignore until you were finished, kind of thing?
So I start fresh and ignore, because I am terrible. So when I'm writing, I tend to read things that are completely outside of the genre. So I have, I read like lots of like psychological thrillers, and then or like police procedurals, like anything that's like completely different. And there's absolutely no way I'm gonna like, sit there, settle down and go, oh, this is so good, or like that's like a good idea, or like, get worried that I'm accidentally gonna like lift something and write it into the book, or like be too heavily inspired by something. So when I'm writing, I tend to move away from it completely. But I did take a break from writing sort of like over the past few months, because I'm sort of waiting for notes on edits for my next book. And then I felt like I could revisit some things. So like I've just finished reading the advanced copy of like Beth O'Leary's new book, which is fantastic.
Good things.
So good. And I reread all of the Bridget Jones books and things like that, the classics.
That's funny. They're a bit of a touchstone, aren't they, in the sort of romance. Even if you go in a completely different direction from them, you kind of need to know, what they were up to. Use them as a jumping off point. That's fantastic. So in terms of one thing that I always get asked, and I swore I wouldn't ask people, but I do like the question: if you were casting your leads, I won't make you do the whole book, but if you were casting your leads, and you had carte blanche, the studio says you can have anyone you want, money's no object. Who do you feel, or who do you think would at least be close to them to play them in a film?
I should be better prepared for this, because I've been asked this a few times, and every time
still arguing with yourself over it.
Oh my gosh, I've got no idea. I'm really sorry. And but other people have, when I've sort of stalled at this question, I've made some great suggestions. And the last time I was asked it, someone said to me, "Well, what about one of the cast members from It's a Sin to play Jeremy?" But they didn't have a recommendation, because I said that it would be really important to me that the actors playing them are queer. And then I was like, but no one's springing to mind. And I guess they're at the forefront of everyone's mind. Who would play Malcolm? That's amazing.
You need a lot of character to play Malcolm, to be fair. That's going to be one heck of a cat.
It's so important. I saw someone earlier say Malcolm is the protagonist, and that has just killed me. That was perfect. He is. He's the star. Honestly, my answer is I don't know, but I would love for someone else to suggest, because I would love an answer to that question the next time I'm up.
Excellent. Well, bear that in mind, you've still got some time to mull over that if you're sitting there thinking. So if you any queer actors who would maybe play Ali or Joe or Jeremy, any suggestions, very welcome. But yes, and one of the real hearts of the book, I think, is Ali and her dad. And obviously she's lost her mum when she was younger, and you can kind of feel that absence through the book. Like she doesn't have that, they're both missing her, and there's that space in their lives. Was that something that you kind of had in mind from the start for Ali, or did you just kind of find that once you sent her back to Sheffield and sort of fleshed out her life?
Actually, at the beginning, both parents were in Sheffield, and in the second edit, I killed off her mum.
Sorry, mother. Out.
My mum read it. She was like, "I won't read too much into that." I felt there was too much to balance at home, and something didn't quite sit right. And Ali, I really wanted the focus to be on Ali's relationship with her dad, because I had this like fully fleshed out character for him, and I loved writing him, and their relationship, I just needed to focus on both of them so much, and it just added this other dimension to their sort of not estrangement, that's too strong, but the way that they are with each other, and the difference in their relationship, and why it's so important for the two of them to support each other, and also for him to be sort of going through the same thing, like looking for sort of he's sort of like trying to get back into dating, and so is she, and I loved that like sort of parallel.
Different life stages, but the same goals. That ultimately, you know, just trying to find their place in the world and find the right person to be at their side when they do. What I found quite interesting as well, it's something I look out for now. In the book itself, there's very, and again, it's not supposed to be something that's like society sucks and everyone's miserable, but the characters don't really encounter what we would kind of be braced for in terms of homophobia or any kind of like misunderstandings about their queerness. So I just wondered, I'm assuming that was a conscious choice, but sort of the reasons behind that, and you know, how you felt about it.
I when I wrote this book, I didn't want it to be so I've said a few times that I wanted it, that their sexuality of the characters to be incidental, but I don't mean that in like a blasé way, like it's important because it's important to people, but I didn't want that to be the focus of their sort of trauma. They've got plenty of trauma going on without the sexuality adding to it, and so often in books when I read about queer characters, they are they deal with trauma almost constantly, and are sort of they have to deal with homophobia, and they have to deal with people being sort of rude to them, and I don't know, these microaggressions, and it's like I personally have had to deal with enough sort of microaggressions and moving through society without like sitting down to read a fun book and being like, oh, there it is again.
There's people being rubbish. And
I really wanted the sexuality to play an important part, but not the biggest part, and I didn't want for it to be a source of trauma in the book, and I wanted for these characters to experience kindness and love from the people around them, and for when queer people read the book, for them to see that as well,
because we deserve that escapism too, in a world where, you know, things are as we understand them, you know, where for the most part we've kind of found our places, and you know, we interact with people who care about us and who don't treat us in that way. So it's nice to have characters immersed in a world where, you know, there's an argument as well. I was reading something the other day, I can't remember who it was, that says as long as we stick to coming out narratives and the trauma sort of angle, queer characters don't really get to develop. They don't get past certain life stages. So even if you've got a character coming out later in life or something, those stories are important and they're so valuable to so many people. But did it give you a bit more freedom to write them, knowing that like they're out, their family knows they're out, their friends know they're out, they're going to meet other queer people and hang out with them? Was that kind of fun to play with?
It was so fun, and they didn't have to there was no waiting around for the acceptance or approval of straight characters in the book for them to start having fun and living their lives. Like, I think I was asked a question recently about the fact about Ali encountering lots of gay people in the book, and it was asked in such an innocent and lovely way that there was definitely nothing else behind it, but the phrase used was and it's like there's a whole parallel universe going on that I don't know about. And I was like, it's not a parallel universe, it's the universe. There are gay people everywhere, and you do tend to find and encounter people that are like you, like whether you seek that out or not. So I really wanted to get that across.
It was one of those things that just another bit of like kind of added to the light and shade of it all, because, you know, so often, especially in romance genres, we get relegated to the token, you know, there's only one of us, there's no one for us to couple off with, and we're just the comic relief or the bitchy friends. So not only to be the central focus, but to also I guess not to have to bend or apologize or sort of make accommodations. It was sort of, if straight people were more the exception in the narrative, then that, that's just how it is, because we do find our people, and we do kind of cluster together, because that was such a nice, even little things like finding out characters later in the book that on first meeting you don't know are gay, then they turn out to be, and you're like, oh, excellent, another one for the team. So it's really nice, and that's I think the importance of telling our own stories as well, and getting to write our books and our about the people that we know and that we want to be with, really, or want to be around. Excellent. So let me see. Is there anything, this is maybe not as common in a rom-com, are there any little Easter eggs or sort of hidden references you've put in the book that you're kind of hoping people will pick up on? Like shout outs to maybe, some of your favorite things? Or is it more kind of, it just lives in its own universe completely?
Yeah, there's a major one, which is that so Sheffield's premier gay establishment, which is a whole chapter dedicated to it.
Of course, lovely Tom's.
Which in the novel is Tom's, yeah, and is actually heavily inspired by with the greatest of love, Dempsey's, which is iconic gay bar and club and I don't know how you would describe it, institution in Sheffield. It's really amazing, and one of my favorite things about the past week since the book came out is people sliding into the DMs to be like, hang on, wait a minute. And people that recognize it, I love it. So yeah, anyone who has been out in Sheffield will know all about that. So yeah,
excellent. I'll have to ask my sister-in-law. She went to uni in Sheffield as well. I'm sure she's come across it at some point.
Oh, yeah.
But that's another thing as well that I thought was quite a nice change of pace. So many queer narratives, and don't get me wrong, I've lived in London and I lived there for 13 years, and it's a huge hub for a reason. I got married in New York. I appreciate it. It's gay Mecca. It's fine. But it was so nice to read a queer world fully that exists within a smaller city, and that the city completely accommodates and everything else. Was that your experience of living in Sheffield as well, or was that a little bit idealized based on time away and stuff?
It's a bit of both. I did have that experience in Sheffield. There is such a fantastic and vibrant queer community in Sheffield, and it's exactly like I said before. If you're looking for lesbians, you will find them everywhere. The Peak District on your doorstep, lesbians everywhere. But I do think it was some of Ali's sort of she had this sort of journey where, from when she was growing up, where she found it perhaps slightly more difficult, to where she is now, and finding that it's more accepting, and she's maybe just more comfortable in herself there, which might be more of what it is. So that is maybe slightly more idealized. But yeah, I mean, anyone who knows Sheffield knows it's a great queer hub.
That's great, and it was nice, a nice shout out for smaller cities as well, because I think for a long time people felt that you had to be, in one central place or another, and now it's like, no, if you go and you build the scene and you interact with it. I mean, Edinburgh has a great one, Glasgow too. Yeah. So, and the more that we're here and the more that we're showing up for stuff, then the bigger and better it gets. Very much we're here, we're queer. But yeah, I'm just seeing we've got some people moving to Sheffield after lockdown now. Excellent.
Amazing.
Representing. A book set in Jersey. Now there's an excuse for a research trip.
Yeah. Would love
Peak District, yes, gosh, it's so nice up there. But yeah, speaking of the next book, I know you've been working on a next book. Is it a sequel, or have we moved on to a new world?
So we've moved on to a new world. I have been asked a lot about whether I'm going to do a sequel, and someone when I was on a Zoom and my editor was there, she was like, maybe you can do it in 10 years time for the paperback. So potentially, but yeah, book 2 is a whole new world, and it's set in Brighton.
Oh, lovely.
And yeah, it's but similar themes. Lots of, I mean, queer friendship and dysfunctional families and tricky relationships, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Because without going into spoiler territory, I was really pleasantly surprised by your sort of ending arc. I won't give it away exactly how it ends, but the fact that it wasn't absolutely wrapped up in a bow, neat and tidy, no questions going forward, was that a choice from the start, or did the story kind of take you there?
That was definitely a case of the story taking me there. I actually wrote that ending several times before landing on that, and it wasn't until so I was dangerously close to saying what happens there. It wasn't until right at the end where I decided to do what I did, because I just wanted there to be that little question mark there. But originally it was going to be completely different. I don't know how to talk about it without completely spoiling it.
Yeah, because if you say the opposite, you're kind of saying what is the opposite of, aren't you?
Yeah.
So leading you
No spoilers. Yeah.
I won't lead you into a cul-de-sac of giving it away there. That's bad of me. But I suppose the question is, relationship-wise, if we go into the romance of it all, did you feel a little hemmed in sometimes by the fact of, obviously, Ali has just broken up with someone. It was a surprise to her and she was blindsided. That's not a spoiler, that's chapter 1. I promise. She then goes on to meet someone as lovely as Joe and is interesting. Was that difficult to write, that balance between she's still yearning for something she's lost, but she is open to something new? I would imagine that's quite a tightrope to keep it, especially over a whole book.
Yeah, it was. So I did find that really tricky, and I never wanted her to fully lose interest in Emily, which is obviously her goal with the whole of the run and everything. But so I think my sort of key thing was making Joe and Emily completely different people, and so without being too heavy-handed, the sort of lightness in the dark, and sort of physically actually moving forward with Joe, running along, and sort of maybe what would happen if she and Emily tried to make another go of things. And so I really like Emily. People are always surprised when I say that, but I think she's got a lot of charm, and she's just perhaps a bit difficult. And I never really wanted to pull people in one direction or another in terms of rooting for Ali to do one thing or another.
I think ultimately the choices that you steer her through, it's about being Team Ali in a sense. She has to choose what makes her happy and what's healthy for her. So that's a pretty good message overall, I think, for any protagonist, because some of them you're like, oh no, I want to shake you. But I think that's interesting as well. How did you find? Have you found that people have reacted to the characters in the way that you expected, or in Emily's case, have they hated her more than you maybe wanted them to, or blamed them for things?
They have. Sorry, I've just seen that an Emily has said try to demonize Emily.
Not all Emilys.
Not all Emily. I mean, people have reacted really strongly to Emily. I've had so many texts from my friends, especially, I hate Emily. And I'm like, she's not all bad. I really like her. But in other ways, I mean, I get a lot of messages about Ali's dad. There's much love for him.
He's great, isn't he? He really is. I know we're seeing him through her eyes as well, but it just makes me very fond, and not even just of dads in a way, but I sort of recognize him as a teacher as well. That kind of, the stays late and does the extra work and tries to get you enthused about subjects that you're never going to care about. Those kind of teachers are just, worth their weight in gold. So
the best. When he's running around the school disco, that for me was just the peak. And I love him.
Peak dad teacher energy, I suppose.
Yeah.
Oh, excellent. I just saw that's actually from a good friend of mine, Bilbo the cat for Malcolm. I don't know if you've come across Bilbo on Twitter, but he would be excellent casting. He's a big ginger tomcat with a great attitude, and he's a queer icon.
Right.
He's awesome. I will be linking people to him later. But that's a good shout for casting. That's kind of who I had in mind when I was thinking of big ginger cats. Actually, I was like, yeah, that's the kind of guy we're looking for. So, in terms of Jeremy, just to go back to him, he deals with a lot, and very frankly as well, which I thought was awesome. He talks about mental health in a way that people maybe talk about, physical health problems. So like he talks about being depressed and having a breakdown. Again, not trying to be too spoilery, but it does come up very early for him, in the way that someone might say, and then I broke my leg and I was on crutches for 6 weeks. Was that sort of something that you wanted to tackle? Obviously you've got a lot of stuff going on in the book as it is, but it can be a tricky topic for a light-hearted romance. So did you feel like just like a good fit for it, or?
Yeah, I really wanted for him to be a character who was like living with depression rather than someone who was struggling with it or being, suffering with it. Like he was very much living with it and like an example of, how it affects you day to day. And I think there is a part in the book. Oh, and it was also really important to me when I was writing about running. And I knew that I was going to be writing about running, that it never be presented as a cure or like for depression, which I think occasionally it is presented as in books, and it's not.
There is no magic one-step process. That was really a relief, I think, as well, because sometimes people can be so evangelical about things like running as if it's the cure for all known ills, and obviously mental health is its own area. It can help, certainly, I think, but it's not gonna cure it all. But I'm just seeing we've got some great questions coming in here, so I'm gonna run those by you. So having just written your debut novel, this is from Olivia, what advice would you have for aspiring queer writers who would love to put their ideas to paper but haven't had the guts, but I think just haven't got to it yet is probably more accurate? And any tips or things to avoid about a debut novel?
Yeah, so my main tip would be write it. Like there is absolutely no substitute for just writing it, and also don't expect it to be good. So when you're writing, don't read it back immediately and go, oh god, that's rubbish, like, or that doesn't make any sense, or well, if they do that, they're not going to do that. Just get down a first draft, put it away for 2 weeks, and then go back to it and look at it again with fresh eyes. And it's getting down the first bit and then going back and editing is the fun bit. Like, but you can't do anything unless you've written something. Like, because for ages I said, I think I want to be a writer. I'm going to be a writer. I want to write a book, but I didn't write anything, and I certainly didn't write a book. So I think sort of that is the first but biggest hurdle. And once you've done that, you're sort of, sailing really.
Exactly. I'd agree with that. I was the same for a number of years. I was like, I will definitely do that one day. Yeah. And it's such a difference between one day and actually. And the other thing as well, I think people feel under pressure to show their writing right away. And it's such a vulnerable thing. Don't feel that can sit in the drawer for 2 weeks or 2 months, and you don't have to show anyone until it's in a place that you're happy with it. Don't rush to show your first drafts off if you feel self-conscious about it. I would add to that.
100%.
But, and Natalie asks, what writers are you inspired by, and how long did it take you to write the book? What was your journey with that overall?
I am inspired by so many writers. So a huge inspiration for me is David Nichols. I adore his books. I think they're so brilliant, and I think he has this perfect sort of combination of being sort of light and then like so moving and funny, and I just love him. And I would add to that Marianne Keyes, who I love her. I love her, and her books. And I think she's actually made this point before, get dismissed in a way that his don't, and I would actually put them in an identical
They're sort of side by side, yeah, aren't they?
Totally. I love both of those authors. How long did my book take? Ages. I started writing it in probably late 2017, early 2018. And then I applied for and got onto the Right Now scheme, which is run by Penguin.
Oh, yeah.
At the end of 2018.
Nice.
Got my publishing deal at the end of 2019. And what are we now? Like
early 21. Yeah,
that's a long time.
Seems like forever, but you have a year in the middle. It doesn't count there, so we're not fully counting 2020. I don't think.
No.
That sounds that's quite a reasonable amount of time, especially if you're doing other things and still working around that as well. So I'm going to ask you the tricky one, and I will admit it was my first thought for a question. This is from Jessie. I love how you're able to portray the process of feelings after being dumped. Were you inspired by dumping in your own life?
I actually wasn't. Like a lot of people have asked me about whether the breakup is real, and it's not. I have had breakups, but they were not like that. They've been completely different circumstances, but there are parts of Ali's way of dealing with breakups which are taken from my own sort of handling of them, which is not the running bit, but is the wallowing bit. Like I am really good at feeling very sorry for myself and that the world is ending. Just creating like a bed cave and not moving, which is like actually what I would really recommend for breakup.
I have two queries asking, have you ever stolen a cat?
No, but I might. So
I would. I have confidence that I would. So I can see that.
If I had to, I would, and I think that she did the right thing.
And would you admit it if you had? Oh, sure.
Yeah, have I?
You'll never know. Nothing in this chat is actionable. Please remember that. But let's see, and this is from Lisa Marie. The distinction between living with and suffering from depression is such an important one. Have you read Bella Mackey's book about mental health and running? And have you been running yourself a bit more during the pandemic, or have you been leaning more towards the baking side of things?
I have read Bella Mackey's book and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was great writing about running, and
phenomenal.
I think a lot of people have really it's touched on something really important, and it really summed up a lot of my feelings about running, because she wasn't necessarily a natural runner, nor am I. In lockdown, I mean, I actually think it's a fairly equal balance. I have done a lot of baking, and then just pushing cake on people all the time, being like, I can cycle it round. I can cycle for 2 hours. I've got nothing else to do. Sure. And then but I've also done loads of running. Like and it's always like fairly short distances. Whatever, relative to what other people do. What's short, and it's the same loop over and over again. But it's been incredible, like for everything. It just sorts my brain out, and there's been something to where we run. We're very lucky to have sort of like nature reserve near us, and we can see as the seasons change, there's something about running around the same place. It gives you that feeling of sort of moving forward, even if you're not necessarily.
Excellent. And Tracy asks, did you base any of the characters on people in
probably accidentally. I was really worried that people were going to read the book and be like, why have you literally just lifted something that happened to me? And I hadn't realized that I'd done it. But no one's come forward yet. I think there's probably a lot of me in various characters. Like I've been asked, like, is Ali based on you? And she's definitely not. I don't think we're very similar, other than the wallowing. But I think there's probably quite a lot of me in Jeremy, and there's probably quite a lot of me in Emily. Those are the sort of two characters that I sort of would say I'm closest to. But yeah, I mean, I hope I haven't based it on anyone else, and I'm sorry if I have.
Some things have maybe crept in, but
Yeah.
not on purpose. That's true. All writers, once you're friends with them, that everything is copy. So, any good story, really embarrassing things that happen to you may one day end up in a future project. Sorry.
Yeah.
And Emily asks, if we read and loved your book, which everyone will, or by this point soon, some point soon, what books would you recommend we read as a follow-on from yours in the same sort of area, maybe?
Let me think. What books would I recommend? If you haven't read In at the Deep End by Kate Davies, I would recommend you read that. It's like much, much filthier than this book, so that's your thing. But I have also recently read anything by Matt Cain. I don't know. Yeah, and he got a book coming out in May called The Secret Life of Albert Entwistle, and it's a gorgeous sort of rom-com about a man coming out later in life, a retired postman coming out later in life, and it's gorgeous and like really feel good. So yeah, that would be a good place to start.
Excellent. Rachel wanted to know, how have you found writing and or as a process during lockdown?
A bit all over the place, to be honest. I wrote all of my second novel between March and July and lockdown 1. It was just a total distraction from everything that was going on, and I was really grateful for it. And then as the lockdowns progressed, I think the motivation is slightly dipped. And I was also worried that I was writing weird things, like,
have I forgotten how humans interact? Yeah,
definitely. Like the less human contact I had, I was like, do people say that? Or like when you go to a pub, how do you get a drink? So I'm very much looking forward to having some normal human.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I hadn't realized how much of my process is sitting in semi-public places and sort of just listening to the world around about me. Like I think I'm ignoring them with my headphones in, but there's a point by, I think, about June, July, where I would have killed someone to go in an empty coffee shop and listen to other people talk about things I had no context for. Yeah. I need some input, please. It was all, it just felt like output and just nothing. So
totally that.
I can see where we would all struggle a little bit with that. I think Olivia, I think I mentioned this a bit earlier on as well, the question, but we know your next book's in Brighton, but if and when there's a third, can we suggest perhaps if we're looking at smaller regional queer communities?
Yeah, so I know Olivia, and I would like for Olivia to offer me like a 4 to 6 week stay at her Jersey home.
That's good.
Yeah, and then maybe I'd consider it. Is there a big queer community in Jersey, or a very tiny one? I guess there's like 10 people that live on Jersey.
It's not somewhere I've ever been, actually, although we've been in this house about Bergerac, so whenever Jersey comes up, that's all the first reference that pops to mind, which must annoy everyone from Jersey. I'm so sorry. I was like, Bergerac? See, what was I looking to? Vacations are short. So yeah, going forward as a writer, is there anything outside of the novel world or the sort of romantic comedy genre that you're also dying to do? Like, is this your niche and you want to play here for a long time, or are you looking to sort of hop around genres maybe at some point, or even mediums into like scripts or poetry or plays or something like that?
I would love to write a screenplay, because I think writing dialogue has just been the best thing about writing this book. Like that's the thing that comes most easily to me, and I think that's definitely something I'd want to give a go. I'd also love to write a YA book. I think that's just something that really appeals to me. And
excellent.
Yeah, and then I guess there's a part of me, but I think this is probably from only reading crime novels at the moment, that's like, could I write a police procedural? Yeah.
Temptation is there. That's a danger when you whatever you read suddenly starts like you're sort of, if I take this apart and maybe work, the temptation's always going to be there. We do have another question from Soph. We're just coming into our last sort of 5 minutes or so. What was your writing journey between first draft and securing a publishing deal? I love this question because everyone's got a slightly different journey, haven't they?
Yeah. So, as I mentioned before, I was on the Penguin Right Now scheme, which is every year they take 10 writers and illustrators, and they who are from groups who are traditionally underrepresented in publishing, and then they sort of assign them a mentor.
Oh, nice.
So with my first draft, I got assigned an editor who she worked at an imprint of Penguin, and I worked with her on it for about 8 months. And then at that point, Penguin it goes to acquisitions at Penguin, and then they decide whether they want to take it or not. And Penguin decided that they didn't. Which is when then I like queried agents, found my agent, and then we worked on it again. Like honestly, it's had, I don't know, 6, 7 drafts, 100 drafts, and then we went on submission, and I went and met with a few publishers, and I ended up with Quercus. But it was a long journey from first draft to getting a publishing deal. So like at least 2 years. It was a very long journey.
That's starting to sound about average. I mean, some people obviously just skip the whole thing and just get swept up as if by lightning. But that's getting rarer these days. It is very much a process of you have to go in either with an agent or a contest or some kind of body behind you to say, hey, this has been checked and sort of other people have found it good, so that you can get their attention. So
I
think that's probably quite common now. Tracy asks, if you weren't a writer, what would you be doing? Or indeed, what are you doing as well as writing at the moment? Because I think a lot of us do have other jobs.
Yeah, so I work full-time in news at the moment. And so that is what I would be doing and what I am doing, which is very full on, and a total departure from the books that I write.
I was going to say, no wonder you're in need of some escapism every now and then, because that does sound pretty full on.
Totally, yeah.
And from Lighthouse themselves, the book was pitched as a rom-com but gay, which is a nice, concise summary of it. How did you feel about how the book would be marketed, and who did you hope your readers would be when you've heard it was going to be published?
I love this question. So this was a huge deal for me so I went and met with some publishers before I got my deal, and which is sort of their opportunity to like pitch themselves to you.
Oh, nice.
And the biggest thing for me was that there were a few meetings that I had where they just didn't mention that the characters were queer.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and and when like talking about the marketing strategy they might employ, they just didn't mention it. And I think it was their way of being like, because it's normal, and
we're so cool with this. Yeah.
And to me, the biggest thing that I wanted was for the publisher to be thrilled that they were publishing a queer rom-com, and that was a huge selling point, rather than just something to be like, look how cool we are. So that was really important to me, that was really shouted about and celebrated. And I wanted my readers, like, I wrote this book for queer people, like that. Those are the people that I like really care about reading the book, and that is why I'm thrilled that I've had such a lovely response from people. Like, that's all that matters to me. And obviously it's to straight people as well. Straight people count, everyone. But like those were the people where I was like, if I reach queer people with this book, I'll be so happy.
Yeah. And it does hit differently when it's like your own community, and you feel like, especially for a genre like this, which is so caught up sometimes in heterosexuality and, just a very normative way of doing things. It's nice to be able to reclaim a bit and say, hey, we get these stories too. And, we get to be the hero of them, and we get to be the villain of them. And it's great. It's just so refreshing to, great minds to see refreshing in the chat as well. But yeah, so just we're coming close to wrapping up. So we'll go out, I think, with Millie's question, which is, what is one book that helped you through the pandemic or the ongoing pandemic? We are getting out.
This is like quite left field, but so at the beginning of the first lockdown, I couldn't read anything, which I think is quite common. Most people couldn't.
Yeah, I was right too.
And then I suddenly read all 3 of the Wolf Hall trilogy in a row.
That's not a light read.
It's not a light read. It's like I don't even know how many pages. Like literally,
they're like that.
A
couple of them are behind me somewhere as well, actually.
And I loved it. Like I was completely immersed. I cried and I cried at the end, even though obviously I knew what was going to happen. And yeah, I would say when I think back at this time, those are the books that I'm going to think about.
Yeah, those are going to be your lockdown reads that just come back to you every time. Like, yeah, and there we were.
Yeah, exactly.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for having this chat with me. I can't believe how quickly it's gone. I'm like, can we have another 3 hours, please? Then I really will end up giving away spoilers.
Oh yeah.
Waiting for your retirement to read them, Emily. Yeah, I've got them here and I haven't started them yet, so I'm taking that as another reason to start on the Wolf Hall trilogy, because the universe has been nudging me since the first one came out, and it's I'm very lucky. My wife pretty much every year from her aunt gets the Booker nominees as a gift, and it's a really thoughtful gift because she's so bookish. And every year I'm like, I'm going to read them too. I'm going to go through them in order. I never finish them. So yeah, we've got some time. Let's get some real reading done. But yes, do get your copy of The Split. The button's at the bottom. And do buy as many books as you possibly can from Lighthouse. They are an institution in Edinburgh and we love and need them dearly. They keep us going both as authors and as readers. And they're in a wonderful inclusive space where we just love going to hang out with them, which we'll hopefully be able to do in the future. Thank you all for your questions and thank you for coming to talk to us. It's been lovely. I'll hand you over to Laura to say her goodbyes as well.
Yeah, I mean, thank you just so much for coming. It's been so much fun, and I really hope you enjoy the book if you've got it, and if you haven't, I really hope that our little chat has made you want to buy it, and if you do, please buy it from Lighthouse Books.
Yes, there is an adorable cat. We were not kidding about that. He's amazing. You will fall in love with Malcolm and the rest of the characters, but mostly Malcolm.
Yeah, mostly.
Excellent. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.